If you have grown beyond the DIY stage, you know that you're looking to hire, you're wanting to staff your accounting department, you might be playing or toying with the idea of hiring a virtual accounting firm. And so today we're going to talk about that. So I'm going to be diving deep into 5 reasons you may want to consider hiring a virtual accounting firm to support you in your financial operations. So the first reason being significant cost and time savings. And so one of the things that I think sometimes we don't think about when we are choosing to hire is the time it takes to hire, the time it takes to onboard, the time that it takes to train, and then also upkeep, right? And I know it's not as I won't say it's not as common, but I've seen in a lot of organizations, because you're so caught up in the hustle and bustle, people playing different roles, a lot of times you don't have the ability to invest as much as you'd probably like in professional development. And so there's that piece as well, as making sure like whoever it is that you hire is up to date on what's happening in the accounting community with rules and regulations and how they're going to affect your organization. And so I think it's really important to consider that time aspect. There's also this just plain notion, right, that hiring an employee is going to be more expensive than outsourcing to a service provider, right? When you're hiring an employee, you have all of the expenses that you just take to even get that person, right? Now, let's say once that person is in the door, you have wages, you have benefits, right? Time off, all of those costs that are associated with providing, a safe and good environment for your employees to work in. When you are working with an outsourced service provider, kind of like what we do at Visionary Accounting Group, you don't take on those costs, right? And so there is the cost to hire, right? So you might spend a little bit of time, of course, vetting, interviewing. A lot of you might put out like RFPs, and so you're looking for different providers to provide you with proposals. And so there is an upfront, right, time piece that you're spending. But after you hire, it's the monthly cost. That's it. And so important to think about. But I also want to dive into because you might be thinking, well, what is that cost, right? So let's talk numbers. So of course, when we are talking numbers, it really is going to depend on the level of individual that you hire, right? And so if we want to talk kind of like base level, when you're hiring a bookkeeper, we're talking anywhere between like maybe $30,000 to $60,000 a year if it was a salaried employee. But if you were outsourcing, a bookkeeper usually can run you from anywhere from about like $300 to $500 a month. Now, if you think about what we do here, we offer more robust accounting services, but like combined with controllership services. And so the controller is typically considered the head of the accounting team, right? Also known as the chief accounting officer, and their salary can range anywhere from like $80,000 to $120,000+ a year, especially depending on where you're located. But if you were to outsource that, typically that can run you from about like $2,500 to maybe $3,500 a month. And then of course, as you go up, because you also have like outsourced CFO providers, you're going to pay more, right, as you go up the scale for a higher level professional. The other part of that is with an outsourced service provider, a lot of times you get a full team. So here, for those who are in our very top level service, they get a full team, not just one person, a full team to support them in their financial operations, and they pay anywhere from $4,500 to $7,500 a month. If you're talking about hiring a full team, typically you're at least going to be hiring 3 people. That is 3 different salaries. You would never get that for close to $4,500 a month. The next benefit is being able to leverage the latest technology. And honestly, this is one of my favorite benefits, because when I did work internally at a nonprofit, or actually at the 2 that I did work at, change management is so difficult because everyone's hands are completely tied, meaning they're already working up to here. And so even considering taking on like new technology, rolling it out was so difficult, right? Because it was like, when do we have the time? But then also, who has the expertise, right? And so I remember my last internal gig, when they brought me on, I was brought on with this specific task of rolling them from their desktop accounting software to their cloud accounting software, because the initial team that was made up of 3 people, like, they were just maxed out as far as work was concerned. When you are working with a virtual firm, one of the main things they have going for them is that they have to be tech enabled, right? They're virtual. So the second benefit of being able to outsource your accounting to a virtual accounting team is that you get to leverage the latest technology. Think about this. How many times have you wanted to implement something, you wanted to even research it, but it's like, who's going to do it? Who has the time, right? When I was a controller at both nonprofits that I worked at, it was always a hassle to really even create a plan for how we were going to research, let alone do demos, let alone implement, then train, right? And then roll it out. And so one of the benefits of working with a virtual accounting team is that they're virtual. And so to some extent, you're going to hope that they are tech savvy. So I know that's what we are, right? We lean heavily into tech. And that means that as a client, you get to benefit from us using that latest technology. So one of the things that your nonprofit gets to benefit from is our ability to stay ahead, right? So we're looking for how we can make the accounting process smoother, how we can streamline things, how we can eliminate manual processes, right? How we can eliminate inefficiencies, right? And we're looking for ways that you can maximize the funds that you're investing, right? And working with us by also spinning that back out to making sure you have a seamless process. And we also know that accounting doesn't work in silos, right? So we work with the executive director, we work with your operations person, we work with your programs team. And so they also benefit as well, because we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that the tech that we implement makes the process smooth for everybody that got to touch accounting. And so they then also benefit, right, from those implementations. And so it also takes the weight off of you, right? We have some clients who come to us and they're still using desktop, right? They want to convert over to the online version, but guess what? They don't have the time, they don't have the ability, or maybe someone on the team just doesn't know how to do it. They come to us, we do it for them, right? They want to implement expense management tools, right? They want to implement certain AI tools that will help to, move the process forward as it relates to like AP and bill pay. They maybe sometimes know that these things exist, but they just don't have the ability to go ahead and implement the right tool, right? Because that's the other thing. It's not just how are we going to implement, but it's also, are we picking the right tool? We do all of that for you. Okay, the next benefit is the ability to focus on managing and growing your organization. How many times as like the executive director or a member of the leadership team have you felt like you've been spending like way too much time in the weeds? You're categorizing transactions, you're reconciling transactions, and that's not your job, right? So when you are partnering with a premium service provider, you get that time back, right? Because someone else is now tasked with making sure that your financial operations are running without a hinge. You also get access to a higher level or higher quality of financial data. It's timely, it's accessible. And so when you're sitting with the board or when you're sitting with the management team, you're not making decisions blindly. You're using that financial data that you've gotten from that premium service provider to then make decisions. A lot of times when executive directors come to us, a lot of the hiccup or the hang up that they have with their current accounting process is like, one, I don't trust the numbers. Two, I may not even be getting the numbers, but then also, what do I do with these, right? How do I interpret these numbers? And when I get this data, how does that then translate to the type of decisions that I'm going to be making? And that's kind of too why I talked about the different levels of service providers, right? As it relates to outsourcing your accounting, because depending on the level that you are looking for determines also the level of strategy or strategic partnership that happens, right? There's a difference between hiring a bookkeeper versus hiring a controller versus hiring a CFO. And so you need to know what your organization needs, but by hiring the right thought partner, strategic partner, that person then should be supplying you with the data that you need, from a financial standpoint to make better decisions within the organization. All right, so we got two more. So the fourth benefit is reduced risk. So as I'm sure you know, working in the nonprofit space, there are a lot of tax codes, rules, regulations, right? Compliance. You have to stay on top of these things. And if your main role, let's just say, is the executive director or is, some other leadership role, it is very well possible to assume, right, that there's no way you're able to stay on top of that role as well as all of the codes and regulations that apply to your organization from an accounting standpoint. And so when you have a dedicated service provider whose job it is to not only manage your finances, but to make sure that you are in compliance, right? To make sure that you are up to code, that reduces the risk for your organization, right? That means, reducing the risk of penalties, making sure that reports are filed on time, making sure that if there have been changes in rules and regulations, that those things have then been implemented in your organization. When you're juggling a lot of things and this is not your main role, something's going to fall through the cracks, and typically it's the accounting. By outsourcing your accounting, right, it is then up to that service provider to make sure that you are up to date on these things. And so now you're not overloaded with information, right? We're going to educate you on exactly what you need to know, what it means for your organization, and then what we're going to do, how we're going to implement that, right? So there's that next level or that next step. And so that is super, super important. And then lastly, on the topic of reduced risk, there's also the case of internal controls. And so by hiring an outsourced accounting provider, right, we can ensure that the organization has appropriate internal controls, like for its size, making sure that the risk of fraud is reduced, but also highlighting those areas where we know will be red flagged, where we know auditors will be looking into, and not to say that you don't know those risks exist, but again, it's not your primary job. And so a lot of times you just don't get to it, right? You just don't have the time. I've seen it time and time again. And so you want to make sure that you're partnering with the right provider to make sure that these things are taken care of for you. The final benefit is improved productivity. I'm sure you probably heard the working in your business versus working on your business. And when we meet a lot of clients, when they first come to us, a lot of times they are juggling a lot of things on their plate. And so they don't really get the bird's eye view. They're really always in the weeds. They're always in the organization, not working on it. And so by outsourcing this grave task, right, because it does require a lot. It's not just data entry, right? You have analysis, you have reporting, right? And so there's a lot of steps and a lot of things that make up the accounting process and that make up your accounting operations. And so you have to make sure that all of these areas are covered. It then becomes a lot when you're doing that, plus whatever your other jobs are within the organization. And so by partnering with a premium, accounting service provider, you can make sure that they handle those things, and it gives you more time to work on the organization versus in it. We already know by controlling or trying to control every aspect of the organization, something is going to get missed. And I think sometimes when we think about accounting, it's that back office operation. And so sometimes we don't give it enough thought when we need to give it a lot more thought, right? Because when funders are giving you money, when donors are giving you money, they want to know that the finances of the organization is being cared for, right? They want to know that you are being great stewards of the money that you've been given. And the only way to do that is to really make your financial operations a priority. And so if you are a growing organization and you know that at this point things are slipping through the cracks, the process might even be chaotic, or things are being missed, it is time to think about your options. And a really great option is outsourcing to a premium qualified accounting service provider. And if you want me to dive a little bit more into any of these areas that we touched on, or even go deeper onto what it's like to partner with, an outsourced accounting provider, please let me know in the comments. I'll see you guys in the next video.